I've been testing Devin, the first AI software engineer, for a week now, and I have a lot of thoughts. If you're not familiar with Devin, back in March, Cognition Labs announced they were working on the first AI software engineer. Basically, a system that will replace real people with artificial intelligence. And the internet, of course, went bonkers with the announcement. Is this the real deal? Are we losing our jobs? The problem is that for weeks now, we have not heard much about Devin. So was this whole thing a marketing plot? Well, I reached out to them, asked for access to the tool, and got it. I've been testing Devin now for a few days, and I'm ready to share what I've learned. I want to do a couple things with this video. First, I will show you 5 projects I gave Devin to solve. I'll take you through everything Devin did, what worked and what didn't work. I want you to have as much information as possible so that you can understand Devin's capabilities. And second, I'll give you my assessment. I'll tell you what I think about Devin and what the future looks like. Should you be scared Devin will take your job? That's exactly what I want to answer with this video. But before I show you the first project, please like this video below. It helps keep videos like this coming, and it's a huge support for my work. Now, let me tell you something that I think is important to understand this video. I have 30 years of experience building software. I've built web, mobile, and desktop applications. I've used a dozen or so different programming languages professionally, and I now focus mainly on machine learning engineering. I am skeptical of AI taking jobs and exponentially improving to a point where humans no longer matter. I believe in the 10% progress we're making, but I also recognize the other 90% hype. I thought Devin was a bit of tech with a ton of marketing around it, and I was shocked when the team gave me access with no strings attached. They did not ask for anything in return. They just let me in. I've been reviewing software products for a long time, and teams with half-baked demos don't give you unrestricted access to their tools. This was a good start. It surprised me, so let's take a look at what I did. This is Devin. So really quick, a walkthrough. On your left here, we have our sessions. So think of these sessions as projects that you're working on with Devin. Here is like the main interface where you are going to talk to Devin. Devin is going to answer to you. And here is Devin's workspace. You can see the terminal window, what Devin is doing. You can see the browser, what Devin is looking at. You can see the editor and have access to all of the files of code that Devin is creating. And you can see the planner where Devin is going to be breaking down the tasks one by one and completing them. The first project I gave Devin was a digital classification application. Here is the prompt, the initial prompt, how I described my project. I wanted to create a web interface to upload the image of a digit 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and have the application to classify that image and tell me what that digit was. Obviously, I wanted to use TensorFlow to train it like a model to recognize those digits. I gave Devin a hint to use the MNIST dataset. It's a very common dataset when you are starting with machine learning. It's very popular. That is going to help the model learn what a digit looks like, what a handwritten digit looks like. That was my prompt. I think this was a very good test because I was forcing Devin to create a front-end application, create a back-end application, train a machine learning model, put all of the pieces together, do the deployment. There is a lot that goes into this, right? It's not a complex application, but it requires a bunch of skills to complete. What's interesting, I cannot go through all of the back and forth here because it will take forever. But what is interesting is that Devin made the decision to use a TensorFlow JavaScript model instead of creating an API and doing all of that. And it was interesting because I didn't say otherwise, but it would have been like an easier solution. So I understand maybe what it went with down that route. But unfortunately for Devin, it got stuck. It had a problem. It asked for my help. And then that was an opportunity for me to steer it away from that solution. So I said, hey, please do not convert the model to TensorFlow.js. Instead, create a simple Flask API. That was an opportunity to steer Devin away. This brings me to something here very interesting, which is at any point while Devin is working, you can tell Devin to do something different. You can add more information. You can make corrections. Whenever Devin gets stuck, whenever it finds an error or finds something that requires more documentation, Devin is going to ask you back. So it's going to ask for your help. I think that is a great feature. I only hope it gets even better. I mean, if we go down here, at some point, Devin finished that Flask API and decided to deploy it in Heroku. So it asked me for Heroku credentials. And you can see here, it says provide credentials. So if you click on this button, you can pass an API key and a secret value, which is a pretty neat way to request for that information because it's not going to be visible on the screen. So I had to create a Heroku account. I didn't have one. I created one and gave my credentials to Devin, and Devin did the deployment there. Again, just going to skip through the details, but Devin first had an issue. It asked me for my help with the deployment. I went to the dashboard. I said, you have not deployed anything yet. Devin says, no, yes, I did. And I'm like, no, you didn't. And Devin said, okay, I think there is an issue. Let me review it. And then he fixed the issue, and then he got the URL deployed. I think that was super cool, the back and forth. And you can see it here. If I scroll down, you can see here it's telling me it has an error. And then I asked, did you deploy the application? And Devin says, yes, the application was deployed. And I was like, no, I looked at the dashboard, there's nothing there. And then Devin said, okay, it seems there might have been an issue with the deployment process. So at the end of this, it deployed the application. I asked for a link. It gave me a link. Unfortunately, it used ngrok to share those links. And as soon as this session ended, well, the links are not longer valid, so I cannot show you the link. I have some of the applications that it created because it deployed them to Netlify, but not the MNIST because it deployed it using ngrok. I should have asked for Netlify instead. But the bottom line, after some back and forth with the front-end application, bottom line is that it completed the exercise with some issues. It finished, it worked. I could call this a successful project, but if we go to the editor, there are many files of code with dead code that is not being used at all by Devin. So I did the review. Obviously, we don't have time to see all of the work that Devin did here, but I can show you, for example, has this file. It's called convert model. I cannot see the name of the file, and the editor, it's broken. So it says convert model program. Let me see, programmatically, and it does a conversion of the model that I created using JavaScript. I'm not sure why I needed that. Has another one here. This one works, so this one is fine. Let me see what else it created. Here is another conversion piece of code, another convert. This one is in Python, another convert. This is the one that I show you. This is another convert in JavaScript. So all of that code might have been used by Devin at some point while it was trying to figure out how to create and serve this model, but it's not longer used and it's not needed anymore. The web page is fine. The API, the Flask API, let me see if I can find it here. Here is the web, the API, it's the Flask API with the predict function. That is fine. Again, some weird things inside, but I'm not gonna get too specific about that because I guess that it's sort of like, okay, but that dead code, it's a turnoff. So let's go to the second project. It was very impressive so far. The second project was a tic-tac-toe game. This is an easy one. I just asked Devin, build a simple tic-tac-toe game in JavaScript. Two computers should play each other. A web page should show the board and both computers playing. There will be no interactions from the user. And Devin built this. Now, it took me a few rounds of styling advice and stuff like that to get exactly what you see here. But let me refresh this page so you can see the tic-tac-toe working. So here it is, two computers, they're playing each other. By the way, it was completely random. And then I asked Devin, hey, can you actually make the computer smarter? Because it was completely random and it made the computers a little bit smarter. The algorithm to play tic-tac-toe is a little bit better. I also asked Devin to use names to generate male and female names for the players and to display the player name here. And it did that. And this button, the history behind this button is just amazing. So at some point when Devin finished, let me see if the browser here shows. Okay, so here it is. I don't know if you can see it. It might be a little bit small, but Devin created this web page here. You can see the reset game button at the top of the board. And I kept asking, can you please move it below the board? And Devin kept saying, oh, I did. I already updated the page. And then I went to the page and it was not there. And then I had to ask again. And then I had to ask again. Let me see if I can find that somewhere. The reset game button is still above the board. It needs to show below the board. This is the second time I asked Devin. And Devin said, oh, I apologize. I'm going to fix it. And then it tells me, okay, has been successfully repositioned. And I'm like, the button is still above the board, unfortunately, right? So I had to look at the index HTML file. I had to open the file and notice that the button at that point, like as you can see here, I have this history slider, so it's not the final version. You can see that the button was still above the tic-tac-toe board. So I literally had to tell Devin, please swap the position of that button with this ID with the board, with the div representing the board. And then Devin finally did that. Like if I scroll the history all the way to the button, you can see that now the button is under it. Again, this one here was deployed by Devin to Netlify. I don't know why it picked Netlify. I'm glad it did, but it did that on its own. It created a URL. It just gave me a URL. So that's why you have access to it right now. All of the styles, everything Devin just came up with those. I'm going to say this is a 10 out of 10. This was very, very impressive. Okay, so that was the second project. The third project that I'm going to show you is 10% extremely impressive, 90% a little bit disappointed. This is a Lunar Lander project. It's an application that I built in 2018. And I built this application using TensorFlow version 1. It's been 6 years since I built this application. Now, what I did here was test the GitHub integration. So this application is stored in GitHub, in my GitHub account. I gave Devin access to my GitHub account, and I asked, your goal is to run the project in this repo. Instructions are in the README file. The README file is huge README file. Let me see if I can find that GitHub repo for you, just so you look at what it looks like. Okay, so this is the Lunar Lander GitHub repo. I gave Devin access to this repo here. These are the instructions. This is an entire explanation of how it works. It's just a lot of information on that README file. There are charts or whatnot. And I only told Devin, just please get it working. At some point, it was very impressive. Let me see if I can find this. But at some point, I took a look at what Devin was doing. And I found this page, migrate from TensorFlow 1 to TensorFlow 2. So somehow Devin knew that he had to migrate my code from TensorFlow 1 to TensorFlow 2 in order to get it running. That was very impressive. I did not ask Devin to do that. I only asked it to run the code. I think that was funny and it was very impressive. So scrolling down, at some point Devin told me, let's see the timing. So at 10:13 a.m. I asked to do this, and 1 hour later, 11:26, it told me that it was updated using TensorFlow 2x compatibility. And I asked Devin, please create a new branch called TensorFlow 2 in the repo and commit your changes to it. And Devin did that. And I downloaded it on my computer. And when I tried to run it on my computer, I realized that Devin used TensorFlow 2.13. I only have 2.16 on my computer. So I came back and I said, update the code to work with TensorFlow 2.16. Devin did that. By the way, Devin told me, yeah, the application is working fine. I went to the terminal, tried the application. I'm going to show you here what the application looks like, but the UI was not showing. So I'm going to run it here. This is the code that Devin created, by the way. Notice that I'm in the TensorFlow 2 branch that Devin created. So I'm going to run it here. And when I did, this UI here, where you can see the lunar lander trying to land, it was not here. It was not showing. So I told Devin, and Devin said, okay, I'm going to fix it. And it fixed it. So that's what I say. This is like 10% extremely impressive. The code here is not only old, it's a complex code. This is using reinforcement learning, is using deep Q learning behind the scenes to teach this lunar lander how to perfectly land within those two flags there. It's a lot of code, not a lot of code. The code is not long, but it's very complex code, okay? It is very impressive that Devin was able to run this code, even though it's so old, and even though it's using TensorFlow, which is very complex, very impressive. It was very disappointing because the changes it made in the code broke the logic of the code. I checked the files, and during that translation from TensorFlow 1 to TensorFlow 2, the changes that Devin made to the code broke the original code. This is one of the things that scary me a little bit about these AI agents, that it looks like it's working. It is not. I promise. This is not doing what it needs to do. All right, so let me close this and we can go and see some of the other projects. That was the Lunar Lander. We already saw the digit classification, the Tic-Tac-Toe. This Python backend implementation is very impressive. Again, Devin used ngrok, so it's not available for me to show you. I can show you the UI because it was Netlify, like the web interface is Netlify, but it's not working anymore because the backend is no longer accessible. What's really impressive about this is that when I got access to Devin, I asked people on Twitter, give me examples so I can show Devin. And somebody sent me this repo. It's a take-home assessment for a full-stack engineer position. So there is a whole explanation here of this take-home assessment. I would say this is for probably an entry-level full-stack engineer. I don't think it's too complex, but I took this as is, did not make any changes to it. I told Devin, I want you to solve this problem, gave it the URL. I want you to code the backend using Python instead of Golang. Obviously, I do not write Golang, so I wanted to do it in Python, and that was it. Those were my instructions. Devin went on and built the whole thing following the instructions given on that repo. Let's see if we can see how that worked. I don't know how much Devin tested it. As you can see, at some point it had trouble with the images, with the cover images. This is just to display podcasts, and like you can type and search the list and filter that list, and it's accessing those podcasts and an API. When it finished, the styles were just horrible. And at some point I said, I don't know where, but probably close to the end, not here. Please improve the UI with better looking styles. And it went from very ugly to a much better UI, right? It's just it knew what I meant. This was successful. Again, it took a lot of back and forth with Devin, me telling, hey, that didn't work, or there is a bug here, or can you improve on this? But I did not have to write any code. It was very successful overall. And that leads me to the final example, which was a RAG application. And notice that I have RAG first attempt and RAG second attempt. This is what happened. So first of all, let's take a quick look at the prompt. This was a longer prompt. What I wanted to do here is create a RAG application using OpenAI and LangChain. And I wanted to be a command line tool written in Python, where I could pass an argument saying load and a website. And I wanted the application to load basically the content of that website into a database, a Pinecone database. And then I had another command to ask questions about the content of that website. Just a pretty simple RAG application, bare bones. This is not rocket science. It's very modern though. It's tech that has not been around forever. I wanted to see how Devin would do with that tech. Devin went on and on and on. At some point, it asked me for the Pinecone API key. I provided it. It asked me for OpenAI API key. I provided it, and it finished. And this was one of the first projects that Devin finished. So I was not sure. I downloaded it, and I closed my session without knowing what I was doing actually. And the application almost worked. I ran it from my local computer. The load command to just basically connect to a website, grab all of the content, create embeddings for it, and upload that to Pinecone. That worked. And I have here the Pinecone console, and this is the website content. This is the one that Devin created. Then the second time I created one called website content embeddings, but the website content, Devin created this, and you can see the chunks are here. So it did that, like the load command worked. But whenever I asked a question, I always got an answer along the lines of, I don't have enough information to answer that question. So it clearly was not able to grab the context from Pinecone and give it to the OpenAI API. I took a look at the code. The code was clean. The code was long, but it was okay. And I could not see at a first glance what the problem was. It looked correct to me. Obviously, there was a bug, but unfortunately, I had closed my session, so I didn't have an opportunity to get back to Devin and say, hey, can you fix this because I'm having issues with it? I didn't have that opportunity. So I decided to create a second session with the same project. This time, I even made the prompt better, I think. But then Devin went nuts. So let me show you the second attempt. My prompt is very similar. I'm just being a little bit more specific just to get to the application a little bit quicker. And I'm going to show you some of the files that Devin created here, because this is just like weird. Let me see. So I have an app file here. This file is 151 lines of code to do something that maybe right now using LangChain, you need a couple dozen lines of code to just build this entire application. Might be a little bit of an exaggeration, but definitely you do not need 151 lines of code. But that's not it. Look at all of these files. I don't know if this is downloading Pinecone library here. Why is it doing this? These outputs that I created, I am not sure where these files are coming from. When I downloaded this to my computer, I got a ton of like hybrid convex. I don't know what this is. I got a ton of files on my computer, like this pinecone.py file, that I'm not sure why Devin needed that file here to do something. By the way, at some point, it asked me for documentation about a functionality that I didn't even know why it needed that functionality. The application did not work. I downloaded a ton of code to my computer that I had no idea why it was needed to be there. Of course, that was just the first attempt. I could have just kept asking questions and trying to make it better, but that will be one of the things that concern me the most about Devin in its current form. How verbose it tends to be, how much code it tends to write or download or whatever it does. I don't like that because that code is very dangerous for a system. Specific to solving one project, Devin feels very slow. Sometimes it takes a long time to answer, and it's a little bit frustrating because you know it's going to be a two-way street. You know it's going to ask you questions. You know it's going to get back to you if it gets stuck, but you cannot be here on your computer just waiting for it to do something, right? So that is a little bit frustrating there. I'm sure that's going to get better. Obviously, this is just, it's not even the first version. It's not even out there. So that will get better. I'm not concerned about that. But something where I really need to focus on is that the actual value of Devin, I don't think is on how fast it can solve one of these projects. I think the value comes from being able to solve many of these projects at the same time. Personally, I could have solved any of these exercises in less time that it took Devin to solve them. I'm pretty sure, right? But all of them, no way. The ability to be working on so many different stuff at the same time, that is bonkers. That is eye-opening. Not perfect, but it's definitely going to get better. So what do I think about all of this? Well, in short, there is a lot to like, a lot to hope for, and a few disappointments. Devin is slow, but that won't be an issue forever. Devin goes off the rails, but you can help it stay on track. The brains of the operation will improve. We don't know how fast, but we know it'll get better. Devin can solve some problems today autonomously with no interventions and no hints. I was not expecting that, and it's huge. Is it enough right now for your manager to kick you out on the street and pay a subscription to Devin? Well, probably not yet. Not in its current form, but I think you should not focus there. Devin and tools like Devin will help us produce much more software of much higher quality than ever before. Just stop for a second and imagine how much more automation we can bring into the world. There is a ton we can do. Demand for good software will increase dramatically, and this will require people with the appropriate skills. That's the area where I think we'll feel the impact of Devin and other tools like it. Our skills. Building software is a bit about writing code and a ton about many other cognitive tasks. Anything repetitive will go away. Anything you can learn with little effort will go away. We know computers will do what computers do best. Artificial intelligence will keep raising the bar. An entry-level job in 2030 will look fundamentally different from an entry-level job today. If you stop moving, you won't stand a chance. If you stop learning, a new generation of tools will make you irrelevant. To close this out, Devin is not perfect, but is real. No, of course it doesn't compare to a good software engineer right now. It is just a tool. It's early and it'll get better, although we don't know how much better. I personally want to keep using it. Please write down in the comments below if you would use Devin in its current state. Is this enough for you? Or do you need to get it much better? With that, I'll say goodbye and I'll see you in the next one.